How's it going, everyone? Back again here to talk about basic materials, and I'll be covering a few of the basic materials to help you get started and talking about some of the general categories of materials and some of the flies you're going to be tying here. And just want to just let you know that there's a lot of variation here with the types of materials and types of hooks and all sorts of stuff. So that's part of the why you're going through this mentoring course, is that I kind of break things down step by step to help you basically tie your first half a dozen high quality types of flies. So you're going to kind of cover a little bit of everything in here. We're not going to get into some of the very detailed types of flies. That'll be for later courses, but just want to give you a little kind of a little refresher on the types of hooks to start off here, because there's a lot of different hooks that are wide variety of shapes and sizes, and depending on what type of fish, whether you're saltwater or sizes of fish, it's going to depend on the type of hooks you use. So I just want to give you that heads up. So let's just start off just showing you. I'll take a look here at the other camera and show you some of these hooks. So you're going to be doing some of the trout flies that we're going to be working on today. You're going to be using some of these, you're going to be seeing some hooks like this. This is a typical streamer hook. This is a 1710 Dai-ichi, size 6. And I'll just show you, pull one of these out of here. Show you what these look like in the hand. Give you some basic anatomy. So there's your hook, and you can see again it's from this package, which is the Dai-ichi. Can you see the number here? Oh, it's actually on the back. Yeah, so 1710 right there is your number. So basically here's the hook, and just the anatomy of the hook, starting on the hook eye. So this is the eye of the hook, and as you go down, this is the shank. Then you get into the bend of the hook and the barb right there. As you can see, this is a barb. So there are barbless hooks, but this is a barbed hook, and then you got your point. So that's the basic anatomy of a hook, and all hooks basically have that same anatomy. When I talk about that, it's going to be important in this course, because I'm going to talk about certain points where we're going to be tying back to and things like that. So I want you to kind of remember that stuff. Also, I will mention when tying hooks, breaking up, the tail, which is always back on this end towards the bend, usually where we start and work our way up. And not only the tail, but you have a abdomen and thorax. So typically, it always is, the abdomen is the back portion, the rear portion. The thorax is the front portion. So that's a typical wet fly. You're going to tie your typical woolly buggers, things like that. As you get into this, I do have a 3/0 hook here. So I'm going to show you kind of another. This is kind of maybe more of the extreme. This is a stainless steel 3/0, and as far as the aughts, or the size of the hook, so this last hook, as you can see, was a size 6. So the way the sizes go is that it's kind of backwards. The smaller the hook, the larger the number. So this is size 14. These are small. That's smaller than a size 6. As you get into like aughts, so this is a stainless steel saltwater hook, and this is a pretty typical saltwater. This actually has a flat eye. You can see the flat eye. There's a lot of hooks that go with the flat eye for various reasons. But this is a 3/0, as you can see, 3/0. So basically the way it works is you go down from, so what we had before, we had a very small size 14 down to a larger size 6. And then if you keep going down, size 4 is larger than that, and then you get to 2s and 1s. And then there is, below 0, it doesn't go to negative, it goes to aught. So a 1/0 would be the next larger hook, and then 3/0 is larger than a 1/0. So that's kind of the way that works. So there's your typical. I showed you the saltwater hook, and this is another little tiny. Actually, again, the flat eye hook, just a different standard hook. That sometimes can be tied in conjunction with tube flies, which again we're not going to touch on in detail in this one. Here's a little. This is a typical steelhead fly from Dai-ichi. This is an up eye hook. I'll show you here. You can see now we got an eye of the hook that's up eye. The color, it's black. So there's definitely different color hooks. So that's a black hook. And just to show you some more, these are, what are these, 3/0? I'm not even sure exactly, but these are some big up eye hooks, big steelhead hooks. And then back to some of these dries. So here are just a few dries. And so that just gives you a quick little rundown of some of the different types of hooks. We're gonna, like I said, as we get into this, I'll show you a little more detail on all these, but I want you to think about what you want to do with the materials after you have your hook. That's kind of straightforward. I'll tell you, on that, but when you're getting into tying your own flies, you need to think about what your materials are doing. So do you want the fly to sink or float? So that'll basically denote whether you want to use certain types of materials. Obviously things like foam and things like that are high floating, but there's also hackles depending on what hackle. You don't want to use a dry fly hackle on a wet fly hook and vice versa. There's certain situations where maybe you want the fly to be a little easier to cast, so you don't want it to be as bulky or heavy. That can, we'll talk about that. So that kind of gets all into, do you want a relatively sparse fly? Are you imitating, what are you imitating, a minnow versus articulation? The one thing I didn't show you, I guess I'll pan back down here really quickly to show you this on the articulation. This is actually a Waddington shank, and this is a kind of a shank, and this is what's used sometimes in steelhead flies where you actually have a trailer. So you'll have a hook like this with using this wire, as you can see, with a trailer back behind, which is the hook. This is the hook. So that kind of gets into articulation and things like that, which is pretty common with a lot of trout flies, some big streamers flies especially. So the woolly bugger will be a minnow type. You'll be imitating a lot of things, including leeches, minnows, things like that. But I want to just give you the basics so it helps you to get a head start on this stuff. And there's no one set example of the types of hooks you're going to be using for each situation, but it does give you an example. So for materials, I want to break down just quickly. I've got my box here, woolly buggers. I'm going to break down the typical anatomy of the fly now, just briefly for you, because I think it's going to be important to see some of this stuff. And I'll show you here, and it might be easier just to show you right through here. So the first thing is the tail, and again, the tail of the fly is in the back. So when we're tying here, we had our hook. Yep, we had our hook. So you can see, like I mentioned before, the tail is in the back part, and there's lots of different tail materials you might use for this fly. There's definitely not, you can use different colors, different types of material. We're going to be using let's see if it's in here, Marabou for our tail. And I'll take a look down here. So again, we're getting back to this point. So when we start our fly, we're going to start our thread back here, and we're going to start with the tail. And the tail is going to be, we're going to use this woolly bugger, Marabou. So what we're going to do is just pull off a piece of that. So this is one type of tail. You can see it's a bushy tail, so it's going to be more of a longer type of pattern. But you can use anything from, you could take this hackle, and a lot of flies use just, pull off some hackle, and that could be your tail. But on the woolly bugger, you're going to start off with this for the tail, and then you are going to find a good hackle that we're going to use, and we're going to be palmering this hackle and tying this in and wrapping. I'll show you how to do that at a later point. And then we also are going to have, for the body, that hackle is going to be wrapped around some of the chenille, which is just kind of a typical material we use quite a bit. And then as you get into that, that's pretty basic on that one fly, but you can add things like crystal flash to give it a little flash, rubber legs. These are just little, give it a little wiggling, little action in the water. You can also add beads. Beads give it weight, do a lot of different things to the fly to give it some action. But just thinking, more so again, we got into a little bit of that, talking about, for this fly, that's what you use. And the fly is, on the basics, it is a tail, a body, and typically a hackle or some type of a wing. That's what you'll see on a lot of flies. But there are lots of synthetics and other types of materials that you might use. So, so again, I want to just stress that, you know, this is just touching the surface here, and on hackles and getting into like how do you choose this hackle. I'm going to actually be sending you some of these materials, but if you have to choose your hackles, there's certain ways to choose the right hackle for your fly, and it depends on, again, the type of fishing you're doing. So I want to show you again on the thread here. There's lots of different threads, and just to give you a primer on this, get this thread right here. Threads basically come, there's two common sizes that you'll probably be using when starting off, and there's this is 8/0. Let's see if we have some more here. Yeah, this is 6/0 here. So the two basic types of sizes that you'll have, you either have 6/0 or 8/0, and the way the 0 goes is that the higher the 0 number, so 8/0 is smaller than 6/0. So the lower the number you get, the larger it is. So again, I guess that's kind of backwards, but just to show you back on the camera. So here's an old roll of some 6/0 uni thread. So this is going to be larger diameter and a little bit stronger than 8/0. So that's why starting out, sometimes it's good to use 6/0, because you tend to break your thread sometimes when you're new to it. So, but for smaller flies, you're going to definitely want to use some of the smaller, probably the 8/0, because the 6/0 might be too bulky. Where do you get materials? Do you need extras? So if you go down, I believe, yes, I think below still, if you go below, there's some links to material. So I'm going to give you these as part of the mentoring package, but once you run out of these, you'll need to go and get some, and I have some links down there, and some of them go to Amazon, and if you have a problem finding those, you can always check with me and I can get you some more. But you will receive all these materials to tie these flies. There are a number of different resources online that I'll be providing. You know, there's some local shops obviously in your area if those are around. But yeah, if you have any questions as you're going through this, I want you to make sure to send me a message, because, you know, the important thing here is to get help, and also to check in with the group on the Facebook group. This will be a good place where if you have questions, you can connect with members there. You can connect with me. So I want to make sure you have a good foundation getting going. I just kind of briefly touched on this, and as we get into some of the other flies here in the next video, we'll talk about what you're going to be seeing here. So yeah, again, I just wanted to thank you for checking out this one, and hopefully that gives you a little foundation as we move on to the next part of the content here. Thanks a lot.